My neighbor claimed my tree was too close to his driveway and cut it down without asking. I replanted something else, something that looks harmless. Within 2 months, his foundation started to crack. I just smiled. My name's Kyle Dawson. I'm 36. I live just outside of Asheville, North Carolina, and up until last summer, I thought I'd found my peace. A quiet life. Good work. A house I'd slowly turned into my own kind of sanctuary, one that started with a single tree. It wasn't a flashy house. 2-bedroom craftsman, built in the late 70s, with a creaky porch and a slope that made mowing a pain. But the first thing you saw when you pulled up wasn't the porch or the crooked mailbox. It was the tree. A big, red maple that I planted with my dad when I was 11. That tree meant something. We picked it out together the week after my mom's funeral. Planted it in silence. It wasn't just a tree. It was where I had my morning coffee. Where I buried my first dog. Where I asked my ex-wife to marry me. And on a random Tuesday in June, it was gone. No note. No warning. Just a patch of sawdust where it used to stand. At first, I thought maybe a storm had knocked it down while I was working late. But there wasn't a branch out of place. Lawn looked untouched. Then I noticed something. The stump had been grinded. This wasn't wind or rot. Someone had cut my tree. And I already knew who. The week before, my new neighbor Todd had stopped me while I was getting my mail. Mid-40s, gold chain. One of those guys who makes everything sound like an insult in disguise. "Hey man," he said. "That tree of yours is dropping a lot of leaves on my driveway. You gonna do something about it, or what?" I laughed lightly. Told him it's a maple, not a pine. Drops leaves for a few weeks in fall, then nothing. But I said I'd rake the corner near the fence if it bugged him. He just stared at me. "Well, long as you're taking care of it." That was our only conversation. No yelling. No threats. Just a weird tension I chalked up to suburbia. Now, standing over the mulch pile where my tree used to be, I felt something break open in my chest. Not rage. Not grief. Something colder. I walked straight to Todd's door. He answered wearing Crocs and a Bluetooth headset. Didn't even pretend to be surprised. "Oh, hey man," he said, like we were about to grab beers. "Saw your tree was getting real close to my drive. Had my guys come out and take care of it. Hope that's cool." I didn't answer. Just blinked. He shrugged. "Didn't think you'd mind. It's right on the edge, and I mean legally. It was leaning over my property, so..." That was when he patted me on the shoulder. Like a coach after a lost game. "Don't stress it. I'll plant you a new one or something." And then, he laughed. Not just a smirk. A full chuckle, as he closed the door in my face. I didn't knock again. I didn't yell. But I went home, pulled out my file cabinet, and found the original property survey. The tree wasn't on the edge. It was 2 feet inside my line. He had no right. And the worst part? He knew it. I called the police that evening. Filed a report for property destruction. The officer was polite but said what I expected. "It's a civil matter. You can take it to small claims court," he said. "But good luck proving damages." Todd's crew hadn't just removed the tree. They'd hauled the wood, ground the stump, cleaned the roots. It was like the tree never existed. And just like that, something inside me shifted. I stopped being angry. I stopped looking at the tree. I started looking at Todd's house. His driveway. His yard. And I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. I don't just work in landscaping. I specialize in root systems. Most of my clients just think I make rich people's yards look pretty. And sure, that's part of it. But my real bread and butter is what happens underneath the soil. I work with root barriers, subterranean irrigation, controlling invasive species without chemicals. I've consulted on university campuses, old cemeteries, even government buildings where shifting roots were cracking foundations. So when Todd thought he could casually erase a 15-year-old maple from my life, I didn't yell. I got quiet. I got interested. I spent the next 2 weeks doing recon. Todd had a single-car driveway, just a thin strip of poured concrete that ran beside his house toward a small detached garage. I noticed a few things immediately. No root barrier along our property line. A visible downward slope, meaning water runoff headed straight for his foundation. And best of all, his wife had just installed a brand new patio with pavers that weren't sealed yet. Perfect. Now, to be clear, I didn't want to do anything illegal. I wasn't going to mess with his house directly. That's the kind of thing that gets you sued or arrested. But there's a gray zone in landscaping. And I knew just what to plant. I went to a private nursery about 45 minutes out of town. Not the kind of place you find online. You need to know a guy? I asked for Philosticus aurea. Common name? Golden bamboo. Legal? Technically. Beautiful? Sure. But underground? It spreads fast, deep, and directionally aggressive. It doesn't need sunlight. It just needs soft soil and a water source. The best part? It doesn't look like a weapon. It looks ornamental. I bought 12 shoots, already potted and matured. I also picked up some soil amendments to make sure the roots stayed fed and guided in one direction. Then I went home and started digging. I laid a root barrier along my side of the property line, just to make sure nothing spread back into my own yard. I shaped the trench, loaded in the bamboo, and positioned everything so that it leaned slightly toward Todd's fence. The installation was quiet, subtle. Took me one weekend. Todd never even looked over. Too busy grilling and shouting at his TV. By Monday morning, you wouldn't even know anything had changed. A neat little row of green stalks, just behind where the maple used to be. And that's the thing. He thought he'd won, but I wasn't fighting the way he expected. I wasn't going to slash tires or dump leaves on his porch. I was planting something patient. Something that doesn't scream, it grows. And the clock had already started. 2 weeks in, I noticed the first runners peeking just under the fence. 3 weeks in, I caught him pulling one out of his flower bed, muttering about weeds. I just waved. Stuff grows fast, I said. You might want to check the edges. He looked at me like I was speaking Greek. I went back inside, logged the date, took a photo, backed it up to the cloud. Because I wasn't just planting revenge. I was documenting it. About 5 weeks after I planted the bamboo, I heard Todd's voice through the open window. He was in his backyard, yelling at someone on the phone. I don't know what kind of crap this is, some kind of grass or something, but it's tearing through my mulch like it's alive. I smiled into my coffee. He'd just discovered the first runners. Golden bamboo doesn't grow in a straight line. It snakes. Its rhizomes tunnel, branch, and multiply. What looks like a polite patch of stalks above ground is a tactical invasion below it. And Todd had no barrier. By week 6, I noticed the first signs of real trouble, a hairline crack on the edge of his concrete driveway. It ran right along the path I'd mapped out. See, the soil under Todd's property was soft clay. The same kind that swells when it's wet, shifts when it's dry. And bamboo thrives in that. Its roots don't just grow, they wedge. They pry. And if there's pressure, like concrete sitting over damp soil, that pressure gives. He thought it was just a cosmetic crack at first. I know because I bumped into him that weekend while taking my trash out. He pointed it out like it was a joke. Guess I gotta get this driveway redone sooner than I thought. This whole neighborhood's sinking. I nodded. Yeah, some plants don't care about concrete. He raised an eyebrow. You put in that bamboo, right? Yep. What is that, anyway? Some kind of grass. Technically, yeah. You should have told me it spreads like that. I kept my tone calm. I planted it on my property. And I installed a barrier. You didn't, right? He didn't answer. That week, I noticed the corner of his new paver patio starting to lift. Just one stone, curling up at the edge. Then 2. Then 4. A week later, his wife, Chelsea, started parking on the street. Her compact SUV was scraping the bottom when she backed over the hump forming in their driveway. I could hear the tension in their arguments. Doors slamming. Heated whispers near the fence. But Todd didn't come over again. Not yet. Instead, he called a contractor. How do I know? Because I made it a point to water my garden every time someone pulled into his drive. The contractor looked like a local guy. He walked around with a clipboard, shook his head a lot, then got down on one knee near the pavers and poked around with a metal rod. Todd kept gesturing toward my fence. I just waved. Later that afternoon, I saw the contractor's truck pull out fast. Todd stood there alone, hands on his hips. The next morning, a city inspector showed up. And I couldn't help it. I greeted him. Hey there. You guys checking on the sidewalk? The inspector shook his head. Neighbor reported invasive plant growth. Wants to know if you're breaching any ordinances. Oh, I smiled. Bamboo's legal. I checked with zoning before I planted it. I even used a barrier. Happy to show you the paperwork if you need. He blinked. You're Kyle Dawson, right? Yep. He made a note and left within 5 minutes. Todd didn't speak to me that day. But that evening, I found a note in my mailbox. No envelope. Just a folded page with thick handwriting. If you don't take that plan out, I will. Consider this your notice. I took a picture of it, dated it, saved it, because it was only a matter of time now, and I wanted everything documented for what was coming next. By week 8, Todd was unraveling. It started with the smell, an earthy, damp rot that crept into his garage. I could smell it from my yard. That wet clay under his slab was no longer compact. The bamboo roots had tunneled beneath it, pulling moisture in, breaking up the soil, lifting from beneath. I saw it happen in slow motion. First the crack in his driveway. Then the warping in his garage door wouldn't close all the way. Then the patio. The pavers looked like someone had pried them up with crowbars. His house wasn't collapsing, but it was moving. And all Todd had was a hose, a rake, and a YouTube tutorial about getting rid of invasive roots. I was on my porch Saturday morning when he finally snapped. He stormed over holding a shovel in one hand, a rolled-up newspaper in the other. You knew what this plant would do, he shouted, waving the paper. You set me up. I stayed seated. I planted on my side. I followed code. He jabbed the shovel toward the row of bamboo shoots, which by now had multiplied into a neat, but visibly spreading growth. I'm taking it out. Right now. You step onto my lawn with that thing, I said, calm as ever. And you're trespassing. You destroy anything, I'll sue for damages. You want me to pay damages? He barked out a dry laugh. Your weed is wrecking my foundation. It's decorative, I said. And technically, it's a grass. He stood there, fuming. I could see his jaw working. Then he stormed back across the lawn, disappeared into his garage, and slammed the door. The next morning, he knocked. He wasn't shouting this time. He wasn't holding a shovel. He was holding a checkbook. I talked to a guy, he said, a real root control specialist. Says it's going to cost me over $18,000 to remove this crap from the yard. And that's if it hasn't gotten under the house yet. I stayed silent. I'll pay you to take it out, he said, flipping open the checkbook. 10 grand. Cash. I'll write it now. I let the offer hang in the air for a second. Then I smiled. That's generous. But no. He blinked. No. I can take it out, I said. But not as your neighbor. As a contractor. He squinted. I run a firm. I continued. So here's what I'll do. I'll send you a formal quote. You'll get the best possible work, permits filed, root removal done right. But that job won't cost 10 grand. How much? 28. Maybe 30. Depends on soil scan. His face darkened. You're insane. I shrugged. You want a professional, you pay professional rates. You want to DIY it, get your shovel back. He didn't answer, just turned and left. I thought that might be the end of it. But it wasn't. Because 2 days later, I saw a landscaping truck pull up. Not mine. Not a specialist. Just some guys with pickup tools and gloves. A local crew. Cheap. I watched from my porch as they poked around his yard. Tried to dig a perimeter. Tried to trace the root lines. And failed. Because the thing about golden bamboo is, if you don't know how to kill it, you're just pruning. I could have told him that. Instead, I watered my own side. Logged my notes. And let nature finish the job. I woke up one morning to the sound of yelling. Not Todd this time. Chelsea. I couldn't hear the words exactly, but her tone carried across the street like a siren. I glanced out the window and saw her standing in the driveway, arms flailing, pointing at the mess that had once been their patio. The stones were now scattered and lifted, some cracked in half. Their newly installed fire pit was tilted sideways like it was sinking into the earth. The lawn was half dug up, with sad piles of dirt around makeshift trenches the landscaping crew had left. And the bamboo? Still spreading. It was creeping up the side of their garage now, thin shoots peeking out of the baseboards like green fingers. Later that day, I got an email from the HOA. A formal notice. Apparently, Todd had filed a complaint against me, claiming that my invasive landscaping choices were creating a safety hazard for adjacent properties. I wasn't surprised. But what did surprise me was that the HOA president copied me on her response. It was one line. Kyle's plantings are within code, on his property, and not a violation of any HOA policy. That was the end of it. Todd tried to escalate, but the board wasn't interested. He'd been here less than a year and had already irritated 3 of them over his trash bins, parking violations, and one unfortunate 4th of July incident involving illegal fireworks and a scorched mailbox. Meanwhile, I had 3 years of clean history and a yard that looked like a magazine spread. So when Todd tried to claim I was sabotaging his property, the HOA actually requested he fix his own landscaping, which they now considered an eyesore. The best part? His property value was tanking. I knew this because a real estate buddy of mine, who'd helped me buy my house, tipped me off. Todd had called her in a panic, asking for an appraisal and a possible listing. She took one look at the cracked concrete, warped foundation lines, and active bamboo growth, and told him, no buyer with a brain will touch this without major excavation first. His estimated resale value? Down by $75,000. And the kicker? Even if he did try to move, he'd have to disclose the root damage in his seller's paperwork. If he didn't, and someone found out after buying, he could be sued for misrepresentation. So he was stuck, trapped in the house he destroyed, by trying to win a petty fight. I didn't gloat. I didn't wave. I didn't even make eye contact. But one evening, as I was trimming my new Japanese maple, planted in the exact spot where the original tree had been, I caught him standing by the fence. Silent, arms crossed, just staring at the bamboo. He didn't say anything. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. I didn't know he was gone until I noticed the silence. No engine revving. No yelling through the garage walls. No awful bass line thumping through my bedroom window. Just quiet. The first sign was the for sale sign, yanked from the ground. Then the moving truck that had been parked there one afternoon. Briefly, no neighbors invited, no goodbyes, not even a last attempt to argue or threaten. Just gone. A neighbor down the block confirmed it for me over coffee. Packed up and left Sunday night. Said they were headed to Raleigh. Couldn't handle the neighborhood politics, she said, complete with sarcastic air quotes. In truth, Todd had no other choice. His foundation was cracking worse by the week. His driveway had become a liability. His insurance premiums skyrocketed after the adjuster flagged the underground damage as a homeowner-induced hazard. And the bids to remove the bamboo properly were ranging between $25,000 and $40,000, and it would take multiple seasons to be sure the roots were dead. There was no quick fix. No duct taping over this kind of problem. The final insult? When he tried to list the house, buyers pulled out after the second inspection. The bamboo was labeled an active root infestation. The phrase made it sound like the house had termites, but worse, because bamboo doesn't die when you spray it. It waits, it spreads, and it comes back. Todd lost almost 80 grand on the sale. The only buyer willing to take it on was an investor who planned to gut the backyard entirely, tear up the driveway, and flip it. As for me, the morning after he left, I went to the nursery and picked out a new tree. Another red maple. Not the same. Of course, nothing would replace the original. But this one was younger, stronger, with deep roots ready to grow. I planted it in the exact same spot, not an inch off. Then I hammered in a small wooden sign at the base. Just for me. It read, "Respect is rooted deep." The new owners moved in a few months later. A quiet couple with a toddler and a golden retriever. They knocked on my door, asked about the bamboo, and if I'd be open to helping them rework the yard. I agreed, on one condition. We'd draw clear boundary lines. We'd plant with care. We'd talk before making changes. They agreed immediately. It's funny. Todd thought he was teaching me a lesson about property lines, about who gets to do what and where. But in the end, the only thing he really taught me was how easy it is to outgrow someone when you know your roots, and how satisfying it is to just let things grow, quietly, steadily, and with purpose. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.